Hey friends, we said that we were going to talk more about how it's possible to start your garden any time of the year, even winter. I created this for us. I'll walk you through it. Also, I'll give you a chance to screenshot it. But I basically broke it up into early season and mid to late season. And of course, that's going to look different depending on what season it is. If it's summer, spring or summer or autumn, it's going to look a little bit different. But the bullet points remain the same. It's also going to look different depending on where you are, what your frost dates are, what kind of plants grow in your area. Minnesota example compared to Mississippi. Keeping in mind that this is going to look a little different for everyone, right? And different from season to season. Let's just take a look. Okay, first let's do the screenshot, right? So early in the season, and actually all the time, who are we kidding? It's time to create soil and mulch. So creating soil and mulch is going to look different at different times of the year. In the spring, it's probably going to look like all of the things that you're gathering up out of your yard that have accumulated there over the winter. In the summer, it's probably going to look like all of the weeds that you're pulling and the branches that you're taking down to create space for things. And in the autumn, like same things. You see what I'm saying? Depending on the season, it's going to depend what it is that you're doing to create that soil and that mulch, but it's a job that's always happening. Planting annuals for the season, right? Annuals are the plants that only live for 1 year. Most of what we would think of as our garden plants are going to be annuals. They're just meant to grow from one seed, makes one plant, and then that's it. Ooh, that's fun. And then we have planting perennials. Perennials are plants that they are going to come back year after year. That's what a perennial is. So early season is a good time to do that usually. Another thing that you can do early on in the season is to prepare for this season's harvest. Because if you wait until the harvest comes in to figure out what you're going to do with it, it's definitely going to be overwhelming. Remember, the wheel of the year it's a merry-go-round. It's always spinning, and it's going to be spinning whenever you jump on it. So if you're starting to feel like you're too late to do something, don't worry, because being too late to a certain part of the growing cycle is the same as being early to the next part of the growing cycle. So just let go of that. It'll come around next year. If let's say that it's like early summer, you had some plans about what you were going to do in the early summer, you didn't do those things, well, it didn't happen. No big deal. So now you can sit either where you're a couple weeks late for the stuff that you wanted to do then, or you could sit where you're a couple weeks early for the stuff that's coming up next. I recommend just let yourself be a little bit early, because otherwise you're just going to be chasing your tail the whole time. On that note, let's take a look at what happens mid to late season. Okay, there's a couple things that are the same when you're entering mid to late season. Again, we're always making soil, right? We're always making soil. And it is possible to plant perennials in the middle of the season. Sometimes people don't want to plant perennials in the middle of the summer, and I totally get that, because they're going to require some special care because it's so hot. But at any rate, it is possible, certainly in the spring and the autumn. But you'll notice that it's not on the list to be planting annuals mid to late season. The reason is because the annuals will have a certain amount of time that it takes for them to make their fruit or their vegetable, and they need to be able to have that time before the last frost. And lots of times if you're going to start that plant after the mid to late season, then it's not going to be able to come to fruition before the frost. And that's talking about mid to late summer. If we're talking about mid to late autumn, it could be that it just simply gets too cold, or maybe it starts to snow. If we're talking mid to late spring, we're actually going to be getting into where it's getting too hot. In the mid to late season, it's getting too hot for some of those fruits and vegetables that want to be planted early in the year. So anyways, that's why we're not planting annuals in the mid to late season. But there's a couple things that we are doing in the mid to late season that we were not doing in the early season. The first one is harvesting this season's crops, and the second one is preparing for the next season's garden. So if it's spring, we're preparing for the summer garden. If it's summer, we're preparing for autumn. And if it's autumn, we're preparing for winter. Anyways, you get it. You know how the seasons go. Now, here's where I want to jump down to this section about harvest. This is just a reminder that your harvest does not just mean what you get out of your own garden. Because let's say that you got started in the mid-season, then you're not going to have a big harvest for that season. or maybe there were a bunch of bugs or some kind of, I don't know, whatever it is. There's a million things that can happen why you didn't get the kind of harvest that you were looking forward to. And if that's the case, all is not lost, because harvest doesn't just mean what comes out of your garden. It means what's kind of flowing through your life. If that means that your community's garden is doing well and there's lots of something to share, then that becomes your harvest too. Or it could even just be that there's a big sale in the produce department. We all know that every once in a while there's this booming sale and you're like, oh my God, how do they sell sweet potatoes for that cheap of a price? Or wow, look at the price on those green beans, right? My suggestion is just pretend that abundance came out of your own garden. Buy a whole bushel bag of green beans and have at it as if you had just picked that out of your garden. That's going to meet your end of having preserved food, right? Or having fresh food on your table, which was the whole point to begin with. Along with, of course, connecting to the land and reintegrating with our ancestral knowledge of what it means to be an earthling. But again, getting a big bunch of green beans at the produce department and taking them home is part of being an earthling right now. So harvest is different. It doesn't always have to be what comes out of your garden, because really that loop of creating a sustainable pantry, essentially, the growing of the food is just part of that equation. So don't forget. So the harvest is going to involve whatever it is that you're going to do to prepare it fresh, and it's also going to be what you do to preserve it and store it. And again, over here on this part, we were saying it's good to figure that out ahead of time, so you're not having to do all of that intellectual work over here in addition to having to do, let's face it, the enormous amount of work that it's going to take to harvest and preserve this stuff. And then there is the preparing for next season's garden. Right? That includes seed selection, or really plant selection, because you may be using seeds or you may be using small plants that we call starts. Well, you might be using seeds or starts, but you do your plant selection and you can make your maps of what's going to go where, and you can start preparing your beds. You can also, late season, if you want to, some plants it's appropriate to start them inside before that season, so you can do that at the end of the last season for the next season. Like I said, it's different for spring, summer, and autumn, but this is the general bullet points for that. So let's take a look at winter. So all winter long, we are living with the harvest. So that means that we're normalizing, going down into our pantry. We're figuring out recipes that we could use with the dehydrated or the canned or the some other way stored and preserved vegetables that we have put up for the winter. Because we didn't put them up just for them to sit there. And also they're still gonna have a shelf life, even though they're stored. They're gonna have probably 1 to 5 or 6 month shelf life. So it's gonna have to be used. And also during the winter, the whole time long, we can be preparing for the spring and the summer and the autumn of the upcoming year. And that's going to look like, again, like I said, each time creating soil and mulch. You can be doing that all winter in most ecosystems. Okay, so I know I have friends as far up as Alaska and Canada, and there's going to be lots of times where yes, there's going to be a thick blanket of snow. You're not going to be able to do anything, but you still will be able to manage like different aspects of compost, right? Even though you're not able to get right down to the ground. Lots of us can also grow microgreens and grow herbs inside in containers. Those of us who have a greenhouse can be doing that. And you can also spend this time choosing the nurseries and the seed companies that you're going to be getting your plants from, making maps, preparing beds. So anyway, there it is. Let me know what you think. I'm really excited to be on this journey together. If you haven't seen it already, this goes along with a whole free course and you can find it you know where.